Today I'd like to continue to take a look at the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 16. Jesus is raising the question to the apostles in terms of who do the apostles say that Jesus is. He's had the situation now where he's been with them for a long time. Jesus has been instructing them. He's been performing miracles. He's been teaching. So at this point, Jesus is thinking, the apostles have a pretty good understanding of who I am. Maybe I should ask them to see where their faith is at. When you think about it, it was probably a good juncture in his ministry for Jesus to pose that question. We've seen at this point in the Gospel of Matthew the question of faith rising many times. Do various people have faith in Jesus? Do they really know who Jesus is? Do they trust Jesus? Is Jesus the Messiah? Is a fair question to raise. So the apostles come up with several questions about who Jesus is. Some have said he's John the Baptist. Some say he's Elijah. Others, Jeremiah, one of the prophets. This is I guess you would say, scuttlebutt, the gossip, the talk of the town about who Jesus is. So people are saying, he's a pretty extraordinary person. He's done some remarkable things. He could be a great prophet, is the consensus among the people. In terms of Elijah, we've taken a look at some of the scriptures with regard to that from the book of Malachi, the book of Sirach. In terms of Jeremiah, there's an interesting passage in the second book of Maccabees, chapter 15, verses 13 to 16, that kind of describes the idea that the Messiah could be, Jesus could be, the great prophet could be, Jeremiah returned. It says, "Then in the same way another man appeared, distinguished by his white hair and dignity, and with an air about him of extraordinary, majestic authority." Certainly, Jesus would qualify in terms of the authority, probably not in terms of the white hair. Then they said to him, "This is God's prophet, Jeremiah, who loves his brethren and fervently prays for his people and for the holy city, Jerusalem." Stretching out his right hand, Jeremiah presented a good sword to Judas. That would be Judas Maccabeus. As he gave it to him, he said, "Accept this holy sword as a gift from God. With it you shall crush your adversaries." So we have Jeremiah coming back to help Judas Maccabeus in his revolution against the authorities. Could Jeremiah be back again? Is the thinking. Jeremiah was regarded by post-exilic Jewish people as one of the greatest figures in their history. And the reason for that was because Jeremiah had sort of predicted what was going to happen to the people. And he tried to get them back on a better course. But as often happens to a prophet, the people do not listen to him. As a matter of fact, unfortunately, the people tried to kill Jeremiah. So, you see, it's not easy being a prophet. And Jeremiah experienced that. So then, after listening to the apostles, their thoughts about what the people are saying Jesus is, maybe he's Elijah, maybe John the Baptist, maybe Jeremiah, Jesus then, in verse 16, throws it back at them. It says, "But who do you say that I am?" We've heard from them what other people are saying. But the question now is, what about you? Jesus is demanding a personal response from the apostles. No longer can they kind of hedge a bit and say, well, this one says or that one says. Now it's up to them. They've been with Jesus. They've observed Jesus. They've seen Jesus in action. What about them? What's going to be their response? Then in verse 16, we have those very famous words, kind of the critical part of the Gospel of Matthew. And it's Simon Peter. And Simon Peter said in reply, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." Wow. What a response. It's an immediate response of faith, belief in Jesus. And it comes from Simon Peter, who is then going to become the leader of the apostles. We consider him in our Catholic tradition to be the first pope, the first really head of the church. Of course, that title was not present at this time. It evolved historically over time. But you can see why, because of his response. Now that expression is very interesting. The Son of the living God. What exactly did Peter mean by that? It really is an exalted messianic title. So of course we have the messianic title, Christos, the Messiah, the Anointed One. But the Son of the living God kind of takes it a step higher. More than Messiah, but even greater than the Messiah in a way. It's used really in reference to Jesus after the resurrection. Of course, the Gospel of Matthew, like all the Gospels, is written after the resurrection of Jesus, so we have that additional layer of experience. And we're projecting back, of course, into his public ministry, an experience that the apostles already had. So they know he is the Son of the living God. And this shows really a deeper understanding of the relationship of Jesus to the Father in the early Christian community. So the understanding of Jesus, of course, is an evolving one. We sometimes think, well, they kind of knew who Jesus was throughout his public ministry. The more likely scenario is that the thought of Jesus as Messiah, the second person of the Trinity, the divine nature of Jesus, these levels of understanding took time to develop. And of course it makes sense. If we put ourselves back into the public ministry of Jesus as an apostle, we were just getting to know Jesus. We were observing what he was doing. We were listening to his teachings. There was certainly a level of belief because they followed him. There certainly was a level of admiration when they saw the marvelous things that he had done. But for a Jewish person at that time to fully understand who Jesus was, this was a stretch. Yes, there was the expectation of Messiah, but there were different concepts of Messiah that were around. Some were very political. The Zealots thought that the Messiah would, of course, overthrow the Romans and establish a Jewish state. very political understanding. So exactly what it meant to be Messiah was a question of some debate. There was a back and forth about it. There was not anything that was definitely said that this is the way the Messiah is going to be. And of course, Jesus coming and trying to teach the apostles and lead them into a deeper understanding of Messiah. That certainly is a huge challenge for Jesus, just as it is a huge challenge for us today to fully understand who Jesus is and what his mission was all about. So this title, the Son of the Living God, expresses a deep belief in Jesus and in Jesus' relationship with the Father. So the statement by Peter here in Matthew chapter 16, verse 16, becomes a critical statement in terms of our faith.